It's me, your boy Max Mogren, reporting live for you here on Wake Up News on the Facebook. This is Wake Up Wyoming. It is a dreary Monday, dumping a rain snow mix out there here in beautiful Alpine, Wyoming. It's April 6th, 2020, a Monday. We got a big show for you. As it says in the title, we're fact checking Facebook's independent fact checkers and official statistics on COVID confirmed cases and death rates. Also, looking at a video of Bill Gates on CBS this morning, publicly admitting to having to change the economy, and says until you're widely vaccinated, mass gatherings may not come back at all. So let's take a quick lookie here. Bill Gates, of course, the man behind Event 201 in association with Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. We're looking at a post here that Facebook has fact-checked by Candace Owens. I'm not a big fan of her work, but I always like to look at all those images that Facebook blocks and see why. Here's an article Candace used to support her claims. Here are the fact checkers, the so-called independent fact checkers from Facebook. We're going to be looking at them. Statistics out of Italy, and then we're getting deep into real statistics from the National Vital Statistics System at the CDC, and the basically the criteria being used for death rates, to calculate death rates from the CDC, from the World Health Organization. And we're taking a good look at this map. Okay, I actually kind of want to apologize. Well, I do. I want to formally apologize to everybody for showing this map so heavily in my broadcast, because as we're going to see today, this map, which is actually from Johns Hopkins, the same institution that worked with Bill Gates on Event 201, and this map, highly suspect data for a lot of reasons, which we're going to get into. We're going to look at their systems being used, how they calculate these numbers on their map, this very widely cited and widely accessed map. Billions of people making requests there per day, or billions of requests, like billions of clicks on this map per day. Looking at the Lancet article detailing how they get their information, looking at the information they actually post, and people's responses at GitHub where this data is all publicly accessible, looking at some of the sources that they are citing, which are completely unreliable as far as I know. And then also looking at CDC flu statistics. So it's a big show. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and play this Bill Gates video to get us started. In order to get the audio, I had to download it. So I'm going to close down a couple things. Bear with me. Again, this broadcast today, there's a lot of data in here. I'm no statistician, so I'm probably going to be fumbling a little bit trying to explain this all in a clear, concise way live while trying to run this broadcast. So bear with me. I'm going to try to do the best I can here. In order to actually show this video and get the audio, I had to download it. So I'm going to hide that. Show that, hide that. This is an excerpt from the CBS This Morning video. I better attribute it properly. You can see CBS This Morning, 800,000 views, 791,000 views on this Bill Gates video. And this video I downloaded is an excerpt that starts at about 16 minutes and 55 seconds in the broadcast. So here we go. Got to make sure I do this right so the audio isn't total trash. I'm going to play this probably a couple times. I'm not sure why, but it seems like the audio and the video don't link up here perfectly. So if you want to see it at the source, there it is. Here we go. Gotta mute myself.
Levels.
As much as you looked at the potential of a pandemic occurring, is there anything that's really surprised you about what's happened in the case of the coronavirus?
I thought we would respond a bit faster. even for me who works in this area, though, the idea of what we're doing, how we're having to change the economy here in order to drop the number of cases, it's really unprecedented. And we're kind of in uncharted territory about how we minimize the pain. Even the issue of once you get the case numbers down, there's a lot of dialogue between our foundation experts and the government now, but what does opening up look like? Which activities like schools, have such benefit and can be done in a way that the risk of transmission is very low?
Yeah.
And which activities, like mass gatherings, may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
Let's watch that again real quick. I'm in the process of starting some watch parties and sharing stuff, but in a minute and 20 seconds there, Billy Gates really reveals a lot. He admits to working in this area, says what we're doing, admits how we're having to change the economy. And most disturbingly of all, he says, until you're widely vaccinated, mass gatherings may not come back at all. Also implied in his statements, if you listen closely, he's saying that schools could be reopened with decreased risk, which in my interpretation means remote online learning. And I question how that would impact children. Let's listen to that again from the beginning. Got to unmute my mic there. Sorry, thanks for bearing with me. It's hard to run the whole operation here while trying to share it and everything. But you can see there, again, sorry, the video was glitching out a little there. I'm not sure why that is, technical difficulties. But if you want to see it straight from the original source, CBS this morning, Bill Gates extended interview. And throughout this interview, he talks about coronavirus, or he talks about vaccinations quite a bit. So it's worth a watch there. Bill Gates, interestingly, he's a businessman. He's a tech guy. How all of a sudden he has become the unelected ruler of the planet, whose opinion is held so highly, I don't really understand. And I don't think any of us should understand that, given Bill Gates's history. Again, interestingly, the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in October of 2019, about 6 months ago, a little less than 6 months ago, they hosted this global pandemic exercise in association with Johns Hopkins and the World Economic Forum. Really strikes me as a bit odd. Things to make you go, And again, we're looking at fact checking the official statistics today. This map right here is from Johns Hopkins, the same folks that were working with Billy Gates to talk about this pandemic exercise event 201 6 months ago. So we're going to look, again, I want to apologize for citing this map so heavily. I've always said these statistics should not be trusted at face value, but we're really going to look at that in depth today. Now, the reason I'm doing this broadcast, I saw this post from Candace Owens. Again, I'm not I'm not totally aligned with her beliefs. I don't take everything she says to be true. But anytime I see people being censored, their stuff's getting hidden, it makes me more interested in what information they're sharing. Candace Owens wrote, and Facebook censored, the number one killer in America is heart disease, 1,002 people per day. Did you know that if you die from heart disease right now and they determine you to be an asymptomatic carrier of COVID-19 in your postmortem, they legally add your death to the coronavirus death toll? So that's quite the statement. Is it true? Is it false? We're going to look at official stats from the CDC, official reporting guidelines for coronavirus deaths, and get to the bottom of this. It seems like there's more truth to that statement than falsehood. Reading her description on this post, important information for everyone to know about coronavirus. Obesity is the number one killer in America. I would agree with that. Right now, they are giving everyone who dies a COVID lab test. That I don't agree with. I don't think that's 100% true. If people die from heart disease but were asymptomatic carriers of COVID-19, their deaths are counted toward the total. Okay, that is true. It seems like anybody, as we'll see in the broadcast today, anybody who did have, unless it was like a murder or a suicide or an obvious, abrupt cause of death like that, people who were tested and had a diagnosis, a laboratory diagnostic of COVID will have it listed as their cause of death. So that's pretty true. I am an asthmatic. If I die from an asthma attack today and it is determined that I have COVID-19 in my system at the time of death, my death counts as complications from coronavirus, even if I never had any symptoms. They are trying desperately to get the numbers they need to justify this pandemic response. So says Candace Owens. Below is an article that explains how they are manipulating deaths. I spent all day today trying to look up daily death rates for any other diseases. You can't get it anywhere. They are reporting only on coronavirus deaths. I suspect if we begin to demand the daily death toll numbers from heart disease, we will observe a deep decline. I'm most interested in New York City overall deaths for this past month, not just from COVID-19. If anyone knows where we can get this information, please let me know. They seem to be locking it down. If they can tell us how many people are dying from coronavirus daily, why can't they tell us how many people are dying otherwise? Good questions there she's raising. This article she links, I'm going to read an excerpt from that article because she does a pretty good job of defending her claims with this article she sources. Again, this this post has been flagged as false information on Facebook. And we're going to look at who flagged it, who Facebook let flag it. So let's get into it. Here's the Spectator article that Candace Owens links to, coming out of the UK from their magazine, published on March 28th, 2020. Again, the situation's evolving so quickly, it's hard to know which statistics to trust. And obviously something that was written over a week ago is not going to have the most up-to-date statistics, so bear that in mind. But the overall point of this article is pretty revealing. Initial reported figures from China and Italy suggested a death rate of 5% to 15%, similar to Spanish flu. Given that cases were increasing exponentially, this raised the prospect of death rates that no healthcare system in the world would be able to cope with. The need to avoid this scenario is the justification for measures being implemented. The Spanish flu is believed to have infected about 1 in 4 of the world's population between 1918 and 1920, or roughly 500 million people, with 50 million deaths. Okay, that 10% death rate. We developed pandemic emergency plans ready to snap into action in case this happened again. At the time of writing, the UK's 422 deaths and 8,077 known cases give an apparent death rate of 5%. This is often cited as a cause for concern, contrasted with the mortality rate of seasonal flu, which is estimated to be about 0.1%. But we ought to look very carefully at the data. Are those figures really comparable? Most of the UK testing has been in hospitals where there's a high concentration of patients susceptible to the effects of any infection. As anyone who has worked with sick people will know, any testing regime that is based only on hospitals will overestimate the virulence of an infection. Also, we're only dealing with those COVID-19 cases that have made people sick enough or worried enough to get tested. There will be many more unaware that they have the virus with either no symptoms or mild ones. That's why when Britain had 590 diagnosed cases, Sir Patrick Vallance, the government's chief scientific advisor, suggested that the real figure was probably between 5,000 and 10,000 cases, 10 to 20 times higher than the 590 diagnosed cases. If he's right, the headline death rates due to this virus are likely to be 10 to 20 times lower, say 0.25% or 0.5%. That puts the COVID-19 mortality rate in the range associated with infections like the flu. But there's another potentially even more serious problem: the way the deaths are recorded. If someone dies of a respiratory infection in the UK, the specific cause of the infection is not usually recorded unless the illness is a rare, notifiable disease. So the vast majority of respiratory deaths in the UK are recorded as bronchopneumonia, pneumonia, old age, or a similar designation. We don't really test for flu or other seasonal infections. If the patient has, say, cancer, motor neuron disease, or another serious disease, this will be recorded as the cause of death, even if the final illness was a respiratory infection. This means UK certifications normally under-record deaths due to respiratory infections. Now look at what has happened since the emergence of COVID-19. Okay, a change. The list of notifiable diseases has been updated. This list, as well as containing smallpox, which has been extinct for many years, and conditions such as anthrax, brucellosis, plague, and rabies, which most UK doctors will never see in their entire careers, has now been amended to include COVID-19, but not flu. That means every positive test for COVID-19 must be notified in a way that it would just not be for flu or most other infections. In the current climate, anyone with a positive test for COVID-19 will certainly be known to clinical staff looking after them. If any of these patients dies, staff will have to record the COVID-19 designation on the death certificate, contrary to usual practice for most infections of this kind. There is a big difference between COVID-19 causing deaths and COVID-19 being found in someone who died of other causes. Making COVID-19 notifiable might give the appearance of it causing increasing numbers of deaths, whether this is true or not. It might appear far more of a killer than flu, simply because of the way deaths are recorded. Okay, that coming from the UK. We've seen a similar situation. You know, the statistics out of Italy. James Corbett at corbettreport.com did a great analysis of the Italian mortality rate on March 31st. And I've cited this video before. I'll go ahead and paste that into the comments. But the key thing here is in Italy, and now it seems the UK, anybody who had a positive test for COVID, if they die, COVID is being listed as their underlying cause of death, right? And this video from James Corbett does a great job of breaking down that situation and showing how the statistics out of Italy can't be trusted. Today, I'm taking a good look at the CDC, the World Health Organization, and calling into question the official statistics coming from our own government agencies. First, let's look again what prompted me down this rabbit hole, what has sent me spending hours and hours last night and hours this morning looking at these government, CDC, World Health Organization sort of websites, trying to make sense of it all, trying to break down how accurate this Johns Hopkins coronavirus global case and death map actually is. Was this post from Candace Owens, which got fact-checked and censored by Lead Stories, okay? Lead Stories, that's important to note. First of all, we always got to check our sources. Who is writing this? Who actually wrote this counter report to Candace's post there? Well, the writer at Lead Stories, the independent fact checker, is Ryan Cooper, a staff writer and fact checker for Lead Stories. He is the former director of programming at CNN International, where he helped shape the network's daily newscasts, broadcast to more than 280 million households around the world. Based in the network's LA bureau, there he managed the team responsible for the 3-hour nightly program Newsroom LA. Okay. So Ryan Cooper is the writer of this report at Lead Stories, and he was the former director of programming at CNN International. So obviously a little more reputable than Snopes. If you follow the Snopes stories, follow the seedy history of Snopes, which comes up way too often. But let's look at a few things in here, most notably, and he makes some good points in here. I'm not trying to take away every grain of truth here, but his entire rebuttal of Owens's post is based on a consultation with Dr. Sally Aiken, MD, the president of NAME, NAME being, I forget, and a practicing medical examiner in Washington State. The Aiken said the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had issued guidance for death certificates on its website. According to its guidance dated March 4th, 2020, it is important to emphasize that coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 should be reported on the death certificate for all decedents, that's people who died, where the disease caused or is assumed to have caused or contributed to death. Okay, those are the guidelines from March 4th, 2020. So there we see right there in this statement that's supposedly rebutting Candace Owens' post that if the disease was assumed to have caused or contributed to the death, it should be reported on the death certificate. Owens also suggested in her Facebook post that if she were to die from an asthma attack, her death would be added to the coronavirus tally. Aiken called out that claim. The statement, "If I die from an asthma attack today and have COVID-19 in my system," shows a lack of understanding about triggers for asthma. A viral infection with respiratory symptoms is often a trigger for severe asthma attack. I would suspect that in these circumstances, COVID-19 would justifiably be listed on the death certificate along with asthma. So there, in a sense, Aiken is actually confirming what Owens said. She's saying, yeah, if you tested positive for COVID and you had an asthma attack and died, it would be justifiable to list COVID-19 on the death certificate. Goes on and on. Now here is where we can call BS on the so-called independent fact checkers. Facebook uses to censor posts. The Washington Post published an investigative story on April 5th, 2020, yesterday, titled "Coronavirus Death Toll. Americans are almost certainly dying of COVID-19, but being left out of the official count," which found that the number of COVID-19 related deaths is likely undercounted. Okay, Washington Post flipping the script here, saying, we've shown that it's being overcounted in Italy. Check out the James Corbett video if you have any doubt. We've shown that it's being overreported in the UK by new standards for reporting deaths. But the Washington Post is telling us that the number of COVID-19 related deaths is likely undercounted. Direct quote from the Washington Post: "The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention," that's the CDC, "counts only deaths in which the presence of the coronavirus is confirmed in a laboratory test. We know that is an underestimation," agency spokeswoman Kristen Nordland said. Okay, so right there, red flag. Washington Post caught in a little, well, actually a rather big lie. As we're going to see, all we got to do is just go look at the actual statistics over there at the CDC. Okay, it's important to note here, these are provisional death counts. Okay, these are not complete. These are death certificate data received and coded by the National Center for Health Statistics as of April 6th. So this does not include every death, but it's important to note that COVID-19 deaths, you can see the little number 1. Deaths, I highlighted it here, deaths with confirmed or presumed COVID-19. Okay, so right there, the official CDC statistics are including presumed COVID-19, which, as we will see, does not mean a test. Again, for this table of data, deaths with confirmed or presumed COVID-19. And on this table as well, deaths with confirmed or presumed COVID-19. So all these COVID statistics we're finding at the CDC in direct contradiction to what the fact checkers cited from a Washington Post article dated yesterday claimed. These death statistics from the CDC include presumed cases. Just to confirm, COVID-19 deaths may also be classified or defined differently in various reporting and surveillance systems. Death counts in this report include laboratory confirmed COVID-19 deaths and clinically confirmed COVID-19 deaths. Clinically confirmed means a doctor saw a patient, looked at the patient's history. Here's an example. A person in a hospital where there are cases of COVID, or a person in a city where there are cases of COVID, or a person who has a relative that they interacted with that had COVID. If this person comes in and they have any of the symptoms associated with COVID, and they can say, well, you're in the hospital, there's other people with COVID here, we think you died of COVID too. That is a clinical diagnosis. So clinically confirmed COVID-19 deaths does not mean they were tested. This includes death where COVID-19 is listed as presumed or probable cause. Some local and state health departments only report laboratory confirmed COVID deaths. This may partly account for differences between the NCHS reported death counts and death counts reported in other sources. Again, it's notable here, provisional counts reported here track approximately 1 to 2 weeks behind other published data sources on the number of COVID-19 deaths in the US. So for example, we can't make a direct comparison of this. If we look at this shows the last 2 months from February 1st, 2020 until April 4th, 2020. And it's saying there's been 1,889 total COVID deaths. Okay, that statistic is not complete. As we can see here, percentage of expected deaths increases over time. And for the last week, we see that only 16% of expected deaths have been reported. So obviously, these statistics are not complete. That's why we can't just go here and say, oh, they're only saying 1,889. Well, how is this website coming up with 9,654? We can't do that. These statistics don't give us a direct correlation. But what it does show us, what these statistics clearly show us, is that the CDC is including presumed COVID-19 deaths in these statistics. Now, to get a better idea of how they do this, let's look at the CDC's own guidelines for reporting COVID-19 deaths. Let me bring this up. Thanks for bearing with me. Vital statistics, reference guidance number 3, April 2020. So this is the latest info from the CDC vital statistics reporting guidance. This basic, long story short, when somebody dies, well, here, I'll show you an example here. We'll go to the bottom first. This one's a good one. Scenario number 3, this is what coroners are using to guide them in how they fill out these cause of death certificates. Here's a scenario number 3, an 86-year-old female with an unconfirmed case of COVID-19. An 86-year-old female passed away at her home. Her husband reported that she was non-ambulatory after suffering an ischemic stroke 3 years ago. Okay, so here's a woman who she couldn't walk because she had a stroke 3 years ago. He stated that 5 days prior, she developed a high fever and severe cough after being exposed to an ill family member who subsequently was diagnosed with COVID-19. Okay, I put in English. she interacted with, or was, she was in close proximity with somebody who was diagnosed with COVID-19. Despite his urging, she refused to go to the hospital, even when her breathing became more labored and temperature escalated. She was unresponsive that morning, and her husband phoned emergency medical services. Upon EMS arrival, the patient was pulseless and apneic. Her husband stated that he and his wife had advanced directives that she was not to be resuscitated. After consulting with medical command, she was pronounced dead, and the coroner was notified. Comment. Although no testing was done, the coroner determined that the likely ultimate cause of death, that's the UCOD, was COVID-19, given the patient's symptoms and exposure to an infected individual. Therefore, COVID-19 was reported on the lowest line used in Part 1. Her ischemic stroke was considered a factor that contributed to her death, but was not a part of the direct causal sequence in Part 1, so it was reported in Part 2. Key thing here, so this woman, good example, she was not tested for COVID. She was exposed to somebody who was tested for COVID and came back positive. And because she had respiratory symptoms, COVID-19 was listed as her probable cause of death. Got it? But it's important to note these, all these statistics, the probable COVID is being coded as COVID. So no test, no guarantee that she had the COVID, but COVID is listed as the cause of death there. And if we look at the rest of this, it's important to read the language here. If COVID-19 played a role in the death, this condition should be specified on the death certificate. In many cases, it is likely that it will be the ultimate cause of death, as it can lead to various life-threatening conditions such as pneumonia and acute respiratory distress syndrome. In these cases, COVID-19 should be reported on the lowest line used in Part 1, with the other conditions to which it gave rise listed on the lines above it. Okay, so Part 1, the bottom, COVID, right there, it's saying COVID-19 should be listed as the ultimate cause of death, which is the bottom line of Part 1 of these death certificates. In some cases, survival from COVID-19 can be complicated by pre-existing medical conditions, especially those that result in diminished lung capacity, such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or asthma. These medical conditions do not cause COVID-19, obviously, but can increase the risk of contracting a respiratory infection and death. So these conditions should be reported in Part 2 and not Part 1, okay? So again, that kind of confirms Candace Owens' statement there. If somebody has, chronic serious diseases and they show COVID-19 symptoms, or they were exposed to, if they live in an area or they went to a hospital where there are cases of COVID-19, you can list COVID-19 as their cause of death. When determining whether COVID-19 played a role in the cause of death, follow the CDC clinical criteria for evaluating the person under investigation for COVID-19, and where possible, conduct appropriate laboratory testing using guidance provided by CDC and local health authorities. In cases where a definite diagnosis of COVID-19 cannot be made, but it is suspected or likely, for example, the circumstances are compelling within a reasonable degree of certainty, it is acceptable to report COVID-19 on the death certificate as probable or presumed, okay? And again, if we look here on the official CDC statistics on their website, I got it highlighted there. Deaths with confirmed or consumed COVID-19 are coded and recorded. In these instances, certifiers should use their best clinical judgment in determining if a COVID-19 infection was likely. However, please note that testing for COVID-19 should be conducted whenever possible. For example, it goes on and on. This is talking about problems here where people can, where coroners and medical professionals can put uncertainty into the overall reading of these death certificates. For example, pneumonia is an intermediate cause of death since it can be caused by a variety of infectious agents or by inhaling a liquid or chemical. Pneumonia is important to report in a cause of death statement, but generally it is not the ultimate cause of death. The cause of pneumonia, such as COVID-19, needs to be stated on the lowest line used in Part 1. Additionally, the reported ultimate cause of death should be specific enough to be useful for public health and research purposes. For example, a viral infection can be a UCOD, but it is not specific. A more specific UCOD in this instance could be COVID-19. So the way I read this, the vital statistics reporting guidance is encouraging doctors to list COVID-19 as the cause of death because it's more specific. Conclusion: an accurate count of the number of deaths due to COVID-19 infection, which depends in part on proper death certification, is critical to ongoing public health surveillance and response. When a death is due to COVID-19, it is likely the ultimate cause of death, and thus it should be reported on the lowest line used in Part 1 of the death certificate. Okay? Ideally, testing for COVID-19 should be conducted, but it is acceptable to report COVID-19 on a death certificate without this confirmation if the circumstances are compelling within a reasonable degree of certainty. So there we see the CDC vital statistics reporting guidance from April 3rd, 2020, telling doctors, telling coroners that they should be specific, and the ultimate cause of death could be COVID-19. And when a death is due to COVID-19 is likely the ultimate cause of death, and thus it should be reported on the lowest line in Part 1 of the death certificate as the UCOD. Interestingly, looking at from that website, I was linked to the World Health Organization, and we're looking at COVID-19 coding in globally, right? What's the World Health Organization? How are they telling doctors and coroners all over the world to code deaths? Well, rather similarly to what's being done in the US, what's being done in Italy, what's being done in the UK. Clinical coding of COVID-19 with ICD-10, that is a international cause of death manual. I believe that's what it stands for, but I could be wrong. I'm no statistician, just trying to wallow through all the misinformation out there and give you guys a little idea of why the official statistics can't be trusted, why the fact checkers need to be fact checked, and why we need to take it all with a grain of salt. I very well may be misreading this, but I'm trying to bring some truth to this. Interestingly, confirmed cases. Okay, if somebody had a positive test result and the patient showed no symptoms, the code is U07.1, which is death by COVID. Positive test result and COVID-19 documented as the cause of death, same code, U07.1. Positive test results, and then you can add other codes for symptoms. But the key thing here, if you have a confirmed case, positive test results, and no symptoms, somebody dies, COVID. Somebody had positive test result and COVID-19 is documented the cause of death, it's COVID death. And now let's look at suspected and probable cases. Okay, again, there's apparent lack of testing out there. They're not testing everybody. That's one thing in Candace Owens' statement that was not true. Not everybody's being tested, but we've seen here that in order to get COVID listed as your presumed cause of death, you do not need to be tested. The code for presumed COVID, according to the World Health Organization, is U07.2. And if a patient presents with acute respiratory illness, so a patient shows up, maybe they got a cold, maybe they got the flu, maybe they were working with wood and breathed a bunch of sawdust, maybe they, whatever it is, if they had contact or expected or suspected exposure to somebody else that had COVID, or they went into a hospital where there were patients with COVID, then their death could be coded as a probable or presumed COVID death. Let's see. And here it is right here. Suspected cases. A patient with acute respiratory illness, that is fever and at least one sign or symptom of respiratory disease, for example, cough or shortness of breath, and no other etiology that fully explains the clinical presentation, and a history of travel to or residence in a country, area, or territory that has reported local transmission of COVID-19 during the 14 days prior to symptom onset should be labeled a suspected case. A patient with any acute respiratory illness and who has been in contact or of a confirmed or probable case of COVID-19 disease during the 14 days prior to the onset of symptoms. Or C, a patient with severe acute respiratory infections, that is fever and at least one sign or symptom of respiratory disease, for example, cough or shortness of breath, and who requires hospitalization and who has for no other etiology that fully explains the clinical presentation. Probable case. A probable case is a suspected case for whom the report from laboratory testing for the COVID-19 is inconclusive. So probable and presumed seem to be used interchangeably here. The key thing is you don't need to have a positive COVID test in order to have it listed as your cause of death, according to the official stats out there. Let's go back to the interwebs off of that. Again, I'm trying to source straight from the CDC, straight from the World Health Organization here. That's the one I already showed you. Again, here is that CDC site. And again, I can't stress it enough. They make it quite clear here that their statistics include confirmed or presumed COVID-19. Interestingly, they're coding, the CDC is coding everything as a UO 7.1, whereas the World Health Organization has also got the UO 7.2, emergency use ICD codes for COVID-19. ICD, I misspoke earlier. ICD means International Classification of Diseases. The COVID-19 disease outbreak has been declared a public health emergency of international concern. An emergency ICD-10 code of UO 7.1 COVID-19 virus identified is assigned to a disease diagnosis of COVID-19 confirmed by laboratory testing. An emergency ICD code of U07.2 COVID-19 virus not identified is assigned to a clinical or epidemiological diagnosis of COVID-19 where laboratory confirmation is inclusive or not available. Both of the codes, 7.1 and 7.2, may be used for mortality coding as a cause of death. In ICD-11, the code for the confirmed diagnosis of COVID-19 is RA0.1.0, and the code for clinical diagnosis suspected or probable is RA01.1. Fun. All the little codes and things. Again, it's hard to trust these official statistics. We're going to get into it now. Sorry if that was a little boring for you all. But it's hard to take the, it's hard to know who to trust. Here's just one example, right? The state of Georgia reported an 11-year-old Georgia boy's coronavirus death, and they walked back on that. The Georgia Department of Public Health has walked back earlier reports that an 11-year-old boy in Metro Atlanta died from the novel coronavirus. State officials announced the child's death Thursday afternoon, noting that he was the youngest Georgian to die from the highly contagious disease. Now department officials say there's no evidence to support that. The age reported was incorrect. DHP, Department of Public Health, told McClatchy News via email. After reviewing medical records, there is no 11-year-old boy who died of COVID-19 in Georgia that we are aware of. It's hard to know who to trust. But one thing, again, I want to publicly apologize that I've been using this map from Johns Hopkins, the same people that brought us Event 201, so heavily because it seems to be very untrustworthy. You go to the Johns Hopkins Whitting School of Engineering Center for System Science and Engineering, and it gives you this pop-up encouraging you to click on their COVID-19 map. And a lot of people have, again, billions of requests being made at that website per day. Looking at their map, frequently asked questions, last updated on March 30th, 2020. How often is the dashboard information updated? The map is maintained in near real time throughout the day through a combination of manual and automated updating. The time of the latest update is noted on the bottom of the dashboard. The GitHub database, which we're going to look at here, Updates daily at around 11:59 p.m. UTC. Okay, what are the sources of data informing the dashboard? Where's the data on this map coming from? The data sources include the World Health Organization, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, the National Health Commission of the People's Republic of China. So those all seem like official sources, right? But then, and also local media reports, local health departments, and the DXY, one of the world's largest online communities for physicians, healthcare professionals, pharmacies, and facilities. Okay, we're going to look at this map closely. We're going to read between the lines here. If I click this button here, it brings up a little more info here. And it's important to note, just like the CDC, confirmed cases include presumptive positive cases. Okay, can't stress it enough. On this Johns Hopkins map, you don't need to have a coronavirus test in order to, you don't have to have a positive test result to show up as a confirmed case. You just need a clinical diagnosis, meaning, you go into a hospital where there are patients with COVID, you live in a city where people have been recorded as having COVID, even if they haven't had a test, if it's presumed that there are COVID cases where you live, and you go to the doctor and you say, I'm experiencing these symptoms that line up with COVID. If a doctor says, I think you have COVID, you're a confirmed case. Interestingly, though, where are they getting this information? They say data sources, World Health Organization, CDC, and assorted other sources. But what are these websites? 1.3 acres, worldometers.info, and BNO. Never heard of any of them. 1.3 acres. Yep, not a. It just says made with love by first generation Chinese immigrants. So I don't know. I don't know where they're getting their information. I've never heard of this source, and I imagine neither have you. So why is it being used to update the most widely cited COVID map on the planet? Worldometers.info. I got them up here already. This one raises a lot of red flags for me. If you notice here on worldometers.info, it's a private company. Their coronavirus cases and deaths closely mirrors what we're seeing on the GIS and data map. Sorry, thanks for bearing with me. So worldwide stats, 1,292,000, 70,798. Worldometers is giving us very close to those statistics. But what I found really odd about this worldometers.info, which Johns Hopkins is clearly stating they're getting information from, is I could go on this website as a total random person and hit this button right here, report coronavirus cases. And I can submit information as a random person. If you notice here too, my email, putting my email in is optional. Okay. So I could go pick a country, I could pick whatever country, I could fill in all this data, give a source URL, and give a URL to verified test performs and other info and my email, or I don't even need to put my email, and I can submit information to that. But what's absurd about this is that I could do that. And apparently somehow that information that I submitted as a random anonymous person on the internet is somehow going to end up on the Johns Hopkins coronavirus doom map. But I want to show you this, the latest updates. Okay, look at this. Oh, somebody submitted a source, 234 new cases and 8 deaths in the United States. So I'm going to click that because, 234 more deaths, that's pretty serious. And the source it brings me to, I already had that open, but I opened it again to show you. I'm going to click it again so you see, boom. It takes me to this random state of Idaho coronavirus page. So I say, okay, 234 new cases and 8 new deaths were reported. Where is that information coming from? Because I just see, I don't see some clear press release or anything here. So I'm going to search for 234. because that was the number of new cases. It doesn't come up. 24 new cases today, 10 deaths, 1,101 confirmed cases, which means presumed positive cases. So where the heck are they getting this 234 number? Let's go to public.tableau.com, which is a link off of that source website, because I'm still looking for where this 234 statistic came from, and I'm not seeing it. If we take 24 and add it to 64 and add it to 122, is that 234? Is that where they're getting the number? Is it, where is it coming from? Again, I'm going to search 234. Doesn't come up anywhere there. So immediately, this website, worldometers.info, that's being used to update the coronavirus COVID-19 global cases by the Center for System Science at Johns Hopkins University. Where are you guys getting your information from? This website, BNO, never heard of it. BNO News. Never heard of it. So how is this website giving information to the Johns Hopkins map, right? If you look here, they're saying where do we get our data? We get it from the World Health Organization, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, the National Health Commission, and the People's Republic of China. Local media reports, local health departments, and the DXY. What is the DXY? Well, let's see. The DXY is listed on their map. It's another highly suspect source of information, in my opinion. Let's click DXY, and that will bring us to this website from China, Chinese website. Let's switch it to English because I cannot read that, and I'm sure a lot of you can't either. And here is their website. Okay, so who's doing this? No clue. They say it's a reliable source. I'm going to click on this data explanations because I have questions. Where's this data coming from? Who are they getting their sources from? They're getting it from the World Health Organization, the CDC, and local media reports. Okay, I've been all over the World Health Organization, the CDC. I don't see these numbers anywhere. And interestingly, you scroll down here. These global statistics are updated regularly throughout the day. DXY is dedicated to providing authoritative, accurate, and timely epidemic data. Follow us at Dr. Ding Zhang on Twitter and contact us if you have any questions. Okay, I'd like to contact you. Dr. Ding Zhang on Twitter. Got it. Let's go find Dr. Ding Zhang on Twitter. Oh, account suspended. So here we have a source being used to, to give us the map, this DXY doctor, some random website out of China that is supposedly reputable. And according to their website, this is their Twitter account. Their Twitter account is suspended. So how the heck, they say, contact us if you have any questions. Well, you can't contact them because they don't even have a Twitter account. Strikes me as a little bit odd. And again, we're being told these statistics are coming from the CDC, the World Health Organization. These are the most up-to-date data I can find from the CDC. Nowhere near, we look at the total deaths in the United States blamed on COVID, according to the Johns Hopkins map, 9,683. Then we go over to the CDC and we look at the total COVID deaths. Again, this is not going to be complete data here, so we can't do a direct comparison. But there is a big difference between 1,889 total COVID-19 deaths over at the CDC. A very, very large difference between 1,889 to 9,683. Who's telling the truth here? I don't know. But just important to note, these Johns Hopkins folks were also working with Billy Gates on the Event 201 pandemic simulation about 6 months ago. See if I highlighted anything in here. I've been trying to find info. We go and look at the map, and this is from February 19th, 2020. This is the professor at Johns Hopkins who put together the map. These are a couple of grad students in her program. It's not a health-related program. The dashboard, and this is where they basically explain their dashboard, but again, it's very old information. The dashboard reports cases at the province level in China, at the city level in the USA, Australia, and Canada, and at the country level otherwise. During January 21st to 22nd to 34th, all data collection and processing were done manually, and updates were typically done twice a day, morning and night. As the outbreak evolved, the manual reporting process became unsustainable. Therefore, on February 1st, we adopted a semi-automated living data stream strategy. Our primary data source, okay, again, this is old. This is from February 19th is when this was published. Our primary data source is DXY, an online platform run by members of the Chinese medical community, which aggregates local media and government reports to provide cumulative totals for COVID-19 cases in near real time at the province level in China and at the country level otherwise. But again, we just looked at DXY, where these statistics come from the Chinese government and the Chinese media, neither of which I would say is very trustworthy. And when we go to DXY, I'm just going to show you again because I can't even make this stuff up. Go to DXY off of their website, switch to the English version because I can't read that, and look for some sort of contact info here or something. There's nothing like that, right? You go to the bottom, there's no contact us. The only contact info I can find is in this data explanations pop-up, and you look for their Twitter account, and their Twitter account doesn't exist. So it doesn't seem like a very reputable source of information to me. To identify new cases, we monitor various Twitter feeds, online news services, and direct communication sent through the dashboard. For city level case reports in the USA, Australia, and Canada, which we began reporting on February 1st, we rely on the US CDC, the Government of Canada, the Australian Government Department of Health, and various state and territory health authorities. All manual updates for countries of regions outside mainland China are coordinated by a team at Johns Hopkins University. So there you go. They're getting their information from all over the place, and several of the sources do not seem exceptionally reliable in my mind. Interestingly, this is their data. This is the Johns Hopkins data. It's available over at GitHub. And let me refresh this because there's a lot of activity here. There's 1,063 issues that people have brought up with the data. 1,063 issues. This one 1 hour ago, time series for deaths in Germany has large discrepancies. Error in France, cases and deaths. Let's see what that one's all about. Despite the numerous warnings from yesterday, April 5th, the number of total cases and total deaths for France are totally wrong. See again the official numbers from Santé Publique France, French Public Health, the National Agency of Public Health. Today, 70,470 cumulative cases and 8,078 cumulative deaths. Okay, also already reported here in issue number 2005. So let's go check that one out. Here's issue number 2005. And if we go in here and we actually click the Santé Publique France.fr, that's their explanation of their I told you I was going to flail on this one because there's so many, it's like, how do you make sense of absurdity? It's hard to do. But let's go back to the map that I've been telling you can't trust, but like a good little monkey, I've been showing it to you all the time. According to the Johns Hopkins map, they're saying France has 93,780 confirmed cases of COVID, 8,093 deaths, but people are pointing out in their issues on their data, France confirmed incorrect for 9/4/2020. It should be 68,605. Confirmed cases 70,478, which we just double checked over at where is it? I had this earlier. There we go. So there are the official French statistics. 70,478. Johns Hopkins telling us 93,780. So they are bumping those figures up by 23,300 people. Doesn't seem quite right. I confirm. French official data are over at government.fr. We can see, that's another website. 70,478, not 93,780. Is it a Trump fake news? Nice French guy. This might be where they are coming up with discrepancy. According to Le Monde French Journal, the CSSEG, this data set that we're looking at, I'm not going to recite all those numbers and letters. Count for France, confirmed causes, cases 424 includes 22,361 potential cases listed in the nursing home, as well as a double count of cases in the ultramarine territories, which are not considered in French official data. Okay. So it's hard to make sense of it all. What are the actual figures? We don't know. Good read there, but you can go in there and look through this. Interestingly, issue raised out of, well, there must be more issues than that because this is issue number 1993. Romerick Gravette commented yesterday, "Dear everyone, I would like to appeal to those responsible for this database," that would be Johns Hopkins, "as a result of errors in the number of cases recorded in France and my investigating a little more the site worldometers.info, it seems to me that the rigor of this site is not clear." Yes, me too. Comments questioning the count carried out in France being only sourced by an article from Reuters, which does not quote many anonymous sources. I think there's a little typo there. Moreover, for the last 48 hours, the sources of the data taken into account via this site come from Facebook and YouTube videos. Of course, these are official press conferences, but there is no link to official sites such as Santé Publique France, French Public Health. I would therefore like to alarm here my colleagues managing this database on the lack of seriousness and the vagueness surrounding the data provided by the site worldometers.info. I also propose that in the official database data, the data from government agencies, or when it is not possible from the World Health Organization, be given priority consideration. Okay. So there we go. Again, looking at worldometers.info, which is being cited as one of their sources. I can go on there. You can go on there. Anybody can go on there and report coronavirus cases anonymously. Raises red flags for me. A website I've never seen letting people submit anonymous tips. Let's see where this one goes. And you can see they have all these listed. So they're at least being a little upfront with their data. But just click on the most recent one, State of Idaho, which is 5 miles that way, literally 5 miles that way. This 234 statistic, I don't see where they could possibly be coming up with it. Twitter, PTI News. Okay, so here's another example. They're saying 264 new cases in India added to the list, and it just takes you to the Twitter feed of a news service in India. How do we know that's true? Serbia. This one looks a little more official. This one going to COVID-19. That looks pretty official, but I can't read that. So how am I supposed to confirm that data? Let's see where this one goes. Interactive Tag Spiegel, website I've never heard of. Looks very official, but again, how do we trust it? How do we trust anything here? I wanted to click that Spain one. Twitter. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a tweet by AGA Breaking, which is Al Jazeera Arabia, I would assume. So, about as reliable as the mainstream media everywhere in the world. Point being, Worldo Stats or whatever it is, and this other website 1.3 acres, which they're citing as a source. These are not official sources in any sense of the word. DX Doctor, super sketchy. And so this map, can you trust it? No. Even the official statistics from the CDC include people that don't have a confirmed diagnosis of COVID, presumed diagnosis. And when you look at the, again, if you want to see this, check it out. Vital Statistics Reference Guidance for listing certifying deaths due to coronavirus. You don't need a positive coronavirus test to be listed as dying from coronavirus. They're encouraging people to list COVID as the cause of death. It's all written out here in plain English. Pretty wild. And on that note, I have some other stuff up here. You know, one thing I like to focus on here, closing all these out. Again, this map, I want to apologize again that I've been showing this map. You know, it was given to me. It shows you how misinformation and unreliable information can spread so rapidly. I got this map. I was sent a link to this map by a friend who's in healthcare. She's a nurse. She's very informed. She got this map from work. They told her this was the most reliable source of information. And as we've seen here today, this map, just like the official statistics from the CDC, confirmed cases include presumptive positive cases. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Got the wrong screen up there. Again, confirmed cases here include presumptive positive cases, and they're getting their sources from DXY. Never heard of it, can't contact it. 1.3acres.com, never heard of it, can't contact it. Worldometers.info, never heard of it. I can go there as an independent citizen and anonymously add statistics. And BNO, another news service that I have never heard of. Additionally, local media reports. So do you think if they're taking all this information from all these different places, some of whom are completely unreputable, there might be a little confusion in the overall situation? I would say so. Looking at, another thing I, took to heart from Candace Owens' tweet was trying to find out deaths due to other circumstances at this time, right? We're being, this COVID death rate is constantly being thrown at us, and these projections on how many deaths there will be due to COVID. Well, we got Billy Gates telling us until you are widely vaccinated, mass gatherings may not come back at all. What are the other statistics looking like out there? And it's hard to find just an apples to apples comparison of everything. One thing I found a little enlightening was on the National Center for Health Statistics, pneumonia and influenza mortality surveillance from the National Center for Health Statistics mortality surveillance system. Okay, there's a graph here. These black lines, the thick black line is the threshold. The thin dark line is the baseline, and the percentage, the red line, is the percentage of pneumonia and influenza mortality. It's the percentage of all deaths due to pneumonia and influenza. Okay, you catch that? So this shows us one thing. If you watch the Bill Gates interview in its entirety, one thing he mentions too is there's probably going to be some seasonable variance to the seriousness of the coronavirus, like many other coronaviruses. And you can see that here reflected in the data going back to 2015, 2016. The percentage of all deaths due to pneumonia and influenza spike in the wintertime. Stands to reason. But you can see, it spikes close to 8% at the height of the flu season every year. And then it drops down to approximately 5.5%, 5.1, 5.4, somewhere in there during the summer months. Stands to reason. But if you look at these total deaths, and when this map changes colors, when it goes from green, see this is week 6 ending February 8th, 2020. The green means it is below the threshold, right? So the thick line. If it goes above threshold, then they say, oh, we are above normal. And you can see right now it's going above normal. Wish they would just give you the dates and not this whole week system here. But you can see throughout this winter, it's been a pretty normal flu season. It has had a few months above average, a few months below average. How many deaths due to influenza and the flu? You can see all this right here. It's not a very good interface. It's kind of annoying. But the point is, per week in the US, we can see that the number of deaths, let's go back to before coronavirus. We'll say February 15th, which is a relatively severe week. Number of influenza deaths for that week, ending on February 15th, 2020, 476 influenza deaths, 3,497 pneumonia deaths, out of a total death rate in the United States of 54,246 deaths. Now, if we look at those statistics, you can see if we go back, you can see if you look at the total deaths, those average between 50 and 60,000 deaths per month. The real question is, are we seeing a huge spike in deaths? I don't know. We're going to have to wait to see that. But if this is truly the pandemic that we are told it is, if we really should be taking the entire world and putting it on lockdown to save us from the coronavirus, we're going to need some more reliable data. One data set that I find especially disturbing right now is the U.S. weekly initial jobless claims. This little GIF here I put up goes back to 1967. And you can see this is the weekly jobless claims. You can see spikes up to close to 700,000 weekly initial jobless claims in 1982. Another big spike, but not quite as high in 2008, 2009. And look at where we are now, off the charts. Over 6 million jobless claims recently, 10 times the previous weekly initial jobless claim record from 1982. 10 times, at least 10 times higher than the highest weekly initial jobless claim rate in the 2008-2009 financial meltdown. It doesn't look pretty, my friends. The coronavirus thing, what's really going on? I don't know. I have my own opinions, and I hope you all do too. I tried to take a good hard look at the, sorry, I'm bringing up all these things. This one, let me hide some things here. This one I thought was kind of funny. Somebody posted that. So let me be clear. The same government who puts glyphosate in your food, right? Monsanto's glyphosate, sprays chemicals in the air, poisons your water, and scares the hell out of you is, I gotta take that down, want to protect you from a virus. Got it. Thanks, Joker. Thanks for the clarification. On that note, I'm signing off. Thank you all for tuning in. I gotta pee like a racehorse. I'm staying hydrated. Again, I have been putting out information to help people stay healthy in the midst of all this. Let me get that up real quick. Whether or not this coronavirus is severe, or whether it is as severe as they tell us, whether we can trust these official statistics, one thing we should all be doing is trying to stay healthy. Can't stress it enough. Here's some general immune boosting measures to help us stay away from expensive germy hospitals so we don't overwhelm the healthcare cartel and get overwhelmed by absurdly costly medical bills. Number 1, stay hydrated. Number 2, get adequate rest. Number 3, don't smoke. 4, don't stress. Flip those, sorry. 5, limit healthy diet and exercise. 6, limit exposure to unnatural EMF. Shut off your Wi-Fi, your cell phones, etc. Number 7, stay warm and dry, especially your feet. Number 8, hit those vitamin supplements, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D3, zinc, etc. Time-tested herbal remedies. There's all sorts of them out there. I like garlic and zinc, but people will talk about echinacea and all sorts of other stuff. Check it out. There are emerging medical therapies approved by the FDA. Dr. Vladimir Zelenko's protocol, there it is. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just copying and pasting information I found on the internet. He had an interview, Dr. Vladimir Zelenko had an interview with former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, where he claimed to have successfully treated 699 patients with 4 hospitalizations total, 0 deaths, and no intubations. It's important to note that if you are intubated, if you are taken into a hospital and put on an ICU ventilator, it is extremely expensive. It costs somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 per day here in the USA. So do what you can to stay healthy. There's some advice. I'm signing off for now. I love all y'all. Have a great day. One love. Peace.